Brian, how are you getting on?
Keeping good, man. Keeping good. How are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. Yeah,
Yeah, nice hair.
enjoying this really mild weather at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny. It's getting a little bit nippier. I found a little bit nippier. I'd say that's why haircut might be
This won't help. Yeah,
a
just
little
back
bit
from the
colder.
barbers there. Yeah, feeling a
I
bit of a
always,
draft, all right.
yeah, I always found that when I had a mop of hair when I was younger, and you go for a haircut, and you're like, "Holy God, this really kept me warm." How's your week been?
It's good. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I wasn't feeling well last week, and it kind of continued into the weekend. But so I'm back to 98% now.
Ninety-eight.
Almost there now. Yeah,
Almost there. It's funny when you have a dose like that and it's lingering. It's like
yeah,
all of a sudden you don't notice it going, but then in the future you're like, "Oh, I'm actually 100% now." You don't see it coming.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's
nice to
good.
have
Yeah.
one.
How about yourself? How was the week?
Yeah, good week, good
Yeah.
week. Busy week as usual, but I feel like I'm getting lots of long-term stuff done, stuff I've been putting off, stuff that I needed
Mm.
to prioritize and wasn't, which the topic of today, ruthless
Mm.
prioritization. Maybe that's even subconsciously helped me to really prioritize that stuff. And here, this accountability stuff that we have going on has
Yeah.
definitely helped me to stay accountable to this stuff. Critical, critical.
That's really interesting. I'd say I'm the opposite. I haven't got to any long term stuff this week.
Right.
It's almost the usual. The reaction, all good stuff, getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Lots of important stuff on, but it seems to be all the reactive stuff, all the short term stuff, just takes up all my time, and I
Yeah.
just did not get time to work on the longer term stuff, which was one of my main targets this week, and I didn't get to it.
Right.
So that's what I'll have to grill you on that now, and this with
Yeah,
the prioritization, because
definitely.
I definitely need to do something there.
Yeah, Devo. How did your three targets? How'd you go with it this
So
week?
yeah, so 2 out of 3. So meatloaf again. I had the park hit the new leaders, right, which was brilliant. So there's a first weekend, they were fully trained and insured, and I wasn't feeling well, so they took over all the workouts and they ran them. I was hoping to be there, like just to bit of support in the background. I couldn't even
Yeah,
do that, but I just know got great feedback from everybody that
love.
attended all the sessions. They were amazing. Some of them taking turns doing the warm up, some of them doing the main part, some of them doing the warm down, but they were excellent. So delighted with that.
Likely win. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. I have a big webinar tomorrow. I was planning all that, getting that ready. I think this time last week, I was only just talking about it. It's now everything's done and dusted. We're pretty much ready to go with it. Just pull the trigger on it tomorrow. And then with the thing I didn't get done, then the longer term thing was planning for 2022, the high level plan. Did not spend a second on that
Right.
this week. So it's 2 out of 3. So that's something I need to focus on. But
Yeah,
I think you had the opposite. Then you had like all your kind of long term
yeah.
focus areas this week.
Yeah, it went well. And the three things, they were very interrelated, the three things I was focusing on this week, and it's continuing on to next week as well. So it's a business proposal that I'm doing. It's for a grant for Leo, which I've been talking about for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the business proposal. So I was trying to get that up to 60%. So I got that mark done. I'm over the line. I'm nearly 70% of that proposal done now. So that was great. And I forget what elements I was working on. I was really looking at the services, the products that I was developing, the future developments, where I'm going in 5-year plan. And it really gave me direction for where I'm going in the future. So it was lovely, a lovely process in doing that, which was great. Website prep was another thing I'm doing for my new website that I hope to launch in early 2022. And we are at a great level with that. I know exactly what it looks like. The guy I'm working with, in terms of, he's giving me a visual idea of what it looks like. We're getting all the content we plan. We know what content we're going to do. We know all the headings that we're going to do. We know the style of it. So we really had an amazing meeting with him. Though it was actually the most productive meeting of my life, actually, which was amazing. So I know exactly where I stand with the website. So the prep, I'm way ahead of the game with that, which is great. Way ahead of what I thought it was going to be. And then in terms related to the business proposal, because I'm looking at marketing and stuff like that as well, for the website, which is going to be sold through the website. And then the brand, what does my brand look like? So the third thing was about getting a description for the brand. And I'm really at a level with that. Something that I was worried about, and it's always been a concern of mine, is that I sort of sell me as the brand. So it's brianpennie.com, and it's about my story that change is possible. But here, that's great for me. So what is it in it for other people? People aren't going to buy products because I have a cool story. So what are they going to get? And it's always something, a fine balance between, this is what I've done and this is what I can do for you. So really around that brand, we nailed the description that grabs the story and the lived experience of me. But it's going to be all about what we can do for you. And it's about the pushing that narrative of what I've done and how I can do that for you. And we've come up with a method description of that in terms of that as well. So that was the third thing around the brand that I'm really delighted with as well. So that was my third thing. So yeah, really delighted with that. So I had to push that onto the next level as well, which is where I'm bringing it next week. Now, 3 of those things are very arbitrary in terms of the 60% isn't. But what I've done now for next week is I'm really hitting certain points on those individual things that I need to tick off the box for next week. So it's giving me, I feel like I'm streamlined, I'm honing it down, I'm getting closer to the goal every day. But it's a lot of mental effort, this stuff, and we're going to be talking about that today, of why it's hard to do these things, because it's hard to grab them. You can't just put out little fires. It's a big, huge fire that you have to put out, and it takes time.
Class, yeah, we'll come to that now. Just one point you mentioned there, the around the website, that meeting you had around the website is the most productive meeting you've ever had in your life. Yeah. What constitutes, or what makes that the most productive meeting ever?
Wow, what makes that the most productive meeting ever? Do you know what was the catalyst for it? Is because I went into that meeting not knowing exactly what it looked like. And through several metaphors with my web designer, he just gave me a visual of what it looked like. And that would have been a huge win in itself. But in terms of, I walked away with, I think, 7 takeaways of what I have to do that massively moved the needle. He knows exactly what he has to do. We also moved this other grant forward that we had to do as well. It was just the amount of things that moved from A to B within that meeting. That's what would do that. But it was like lots of insights were dropping on top of the actionable things that you can see. Lots of insights dropped to me, right? That's what it's going to look like. That's how that works. That's how that works. That's how that's going to sell things in the background. That's how those things are going to link. So I think it was a lot of ideas that I had a knowledge around this. And I'm working so much. I think because I'm doing the business proposal as well, and I'm doing the branding as well, I think lots of things are dropping because I'm working on interrelated things, and lots of things just dropped in that meeting for me. That was the key thing.
Brilliant, yeah. That's class.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
So, ruthless prioritization.
Ruthless prioritization. So
this week, an example. This could have been any week really, but this week is a great example of it for me. I've been in the business, putting out those fires, if you like, reacting to stuff, important stuff like the webinar coming up tomorrow. I had lots of emails I wanted to get sent out kind of to the mailing list. This kind of idea, all important stuff, preparing for deliveries now over the next couple of weeks, kind of short-term stuff. How do I get out of the short-term stuff, or is it allowing time, or what, to allow me to focus on the long-term stuff as well, in parallel, if you like? I mean, not one or the other, but in parallel. Is there any tips there, any advice there on that, or where do I start?
Yeah, there really is, Brian. There's a mental model, or a principle, a kind of a model of way of doing this, and it's something that I've come across so many times. I came across it before I got into the business world. I came across it in a book, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I thought it was called the Covey Matrix. So it's a matrix, the 4-piece matrix that he uses. But then I came across it again in terms of mental models and principles, and I heard it's the Eisenhower Magic. So President Eisenhower came up with that as well, and there it is up on screen there now. And basically the matrix works like this. So you have urgent and non-urgent, and you have important and not important. So you have quadrant 1 on the left, quadrant 1 on the top left, quadrant 2 on the top right, quadrant 4 on the bottom right, and quadrant 3 on the bottom left. Now, where we need to be, and where I've been this week, has been in quadrant 2.
Yeah, and that's where I need to be, at least a little bit of the time,
100%. And where I think you've been this week is quadrant 1. Now, what quadrant 3 and 4 is, there's you just got to stay away from them, really, to be quite honest. So they're not important. So let's say quadrant 4 is like time wasters. Let's say people that are just wasting your time. Facebook, procrastinating on all kinds of things, some calls and emails. They're just trivial stuff that isn't important, isn't going to move the needle forward in any way. So get rid of that stuff. That's gone. It's not urgent and it's not important. Gone. Down the bottom left, quadrant 3 is like, it's not important, but it's urgent as well. So you might be getting interrupted by people. So it's urgent because they're interrupting you there straight away. And it could be the odd call that you get. But it's not important. So you need to get rid of those things, get rid of those distractions.
I'd probably spend some time there. I'd say it's between mostly quadrant 1, but also quadrant 3 as well. Problem with quadrant 3 is it's distracting as well.
This is
it. If you're interrupted, then it's hard to get back into your flow, whatever you were doing.
can take up to 20 minutes, they say, you know what I mean? 20 minutes to get back into that flow. So it's like, and you can implement things like just sort of knocking your apps off, like use the app freedom, which knocks your internet stuff off. If you want to work on stuff that you can without the internet, or just go to a coffee shop so you're not going to be interrupted. There's lots of ways of doing that. But I find the problem that you've been having, Brian, is, and that I usually have, and that everybody has, is this quadrant one stuff. And it's like emails that are urgent and are important. Somebody getting in contact with you that need to talk to you now, and it's important. Let's say you being sick, like let's say it was urgent and important that you needed to get in contact with those other people at the HIT classes to sort that out. It was urgent and important, and you had to get it done. But, and these things, they're inevitable. There's nothing we can really do about that. In terms of some of it will always be there, but it's about mitigating that as much as you can. So you are working on the non-urgent stuff that is important, the most important thing. And like myself, this week it's around the brand and the marketing, long-term planning, personal growth stuff as well. Recreation is really, we're talking about R&R, so that's really important as well. Relationship building. So for that meeting I had, let's say for the website, I was working on my brand, I was working future planning, I was building creating a network with someone as well, creating connections with someone who is a really great operator in this field as well. So it was real quadrant two stuff. I could have done this in January, February, March, wouldn't have been a major impact, let's say in the short term. But this is stuff, it's not urgent, but it's so important. And this is where you need to be. Now, a key piece of this as well, Brian, is around like recreation is their personal growth. If you're not looking at yourself and working on your soul, that soul food stuff, everything else is going to fall by the wayside as well. And there's this idea that I had, sorry?
I love that, yeah.
Yeah, and there's this idea, and you'll love this particularly as well, because I know you're into your fitness, and it's something we talk about a lot. So I think I got it in a book by something Keller. His name is. It's the one thing. So what is the one thing that moves the needle more than most? What is the one domino that knocks down all the other dominoes? And like realistically, there's more than one domino, but what is the biggest thing that has the biggest impact on other things? And for me, this falls in the quadrant two, and I know it does for you as well. And it's exercise and personal growth. But for me, when I exercise, I think better, I feel better, and I act better. I'm clearer, I'm more focused. I'm working on personal growth as well. And it's really important to realize that you've got to get your mind right to be in that place. And that is where the quadrant two is. And granted, quadrant one stuff will come up, busy emails, putting out fires and all those kinds of things, which can be like testing on you. Like it's stressful when you're getting interrupted all the time. But if you look after that number one domino, you're in a much better place to react to the quadrant one stuff, so you can get back to quadrant two as quickly as possible. But what I would say, a big takeaway here for anyone listening that's struggling with this, and for yourself as well, Brian, is to what is the number one thing in terms of let's say the long-term stuff you have to do, and put 2 hours aside in the morning for that, and make it ruthlessly prioritize that I'm doing this before I do anything else. Knock your emails off, don't answer them. As Brian Tracy used to say, eat that first frog. When you eat that frog in the morning, everything else is that little bit easier, and ruthlessly prioritize that. And that's so crucial. Get that quadrant two stuff done early in the day, and then it just makes everything else that little bit easier, and you're moving that long-term needle. And
is there a certain percentage of quadrant two stuff we should be doing? Is it like, should we be spending all our time there?
No.
Or what is it?
Well, you know what? In an ideal world, yes. And let's say you could, like, delegating is a huge part of quadrant two work. So if you're putting out so many fires in that are important and urgent, well, say to yourself, well, can someone else do this? Can I hire someone, a virtual assistant? Do I need to take on a second person? Like an assistant that's going to look after all those things. So delegating and training is a huge part of quadrant two. So you train someone to do the stuff that's important and urgent in quadrant one, so you can focus on quadrant two. A big part for me, so I'm doing this Leo grant, so I can take on someone in the new year that's going to look after my quadrant one stuff, so I can focus on content creation, network building, marketing, all of the stuff that's in quadrant two, that long-term stuff. So that's a big part of it as well. So in an ideal world, yes, 100% in quadrant two, or 95%, but it's not really realistic. But if you look at the greatest CEOs in the world, like let's say Bill Gates, for example, I don't think he's putting out fires. He lives in quadrant two. He spends weeks at a time going reading stuff. They live in quadrant two, and that's a long-term goal.
The long-term goal is to get to quadrant 2, to be able to stay in quadrant 2. Yeah, Bill's probably earned his stripes. Like he can hang out in quadrant 2 now.
Now earn the stripes.
Yeah.
$2 billion in the bank account.
Do you know what I think is interesting? Like, so I'm looking at the targets, say, for next week, and I'm wondering, should we be saying, we try and set 3 targets each week that we're going to work on and keep ourselves accountable to that on each call? Should I be, at least one of them targets should be a quadrant 2. If not, maybe 2 of them.
Yeah.
Depending on the deadline driven projects that you have that week.
Yeah. Well, do you know what, Brian? I would even say, so in quadrant 2, and like everything in life, nothing is black and white. In quadrant 2 could be like so it could be a week long, 2 weeks long. It's just not that urgent stuff that jumps up out of nowhere, that way. So I would sort of say that all of our 3 things should always be quadrant 2. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on this as we go along, but they should all be quadrant 2-ish to an extent, that way. Like what you call it? Let's say what's something that you have for next week, and we'll have a look at that. Actually,
for example, next week just happens to be, they're all kind of coinciding. I've got 3 deliveries, 3 events across the Wednesday and the Thursday, not including our call.
Yeah,
kind of three separate companies I have deliveries for, and it just happened to fall then. So I want to be 100% prepared for them this time next week. That's kind of on my to-do list, if you like. They sound like deadline-driven projects to me. Quadrant 1, would I be right?
They are deadline-driven projects, right? But they are very much the outcome of quadrant 2 work. Like you've put in a lot of work into that. You've created these courses, content creation, and this is the delivery of them. So I would just call them the end point of quadrant 2 work. It's the delivery of them. Now, what I would say is deadline-driven projects in quadrant 1. Other things that are going to get in the way of that in the meantime, they're the things that you need to be avoiding. I need to look into that. That's sort of interesting, deadline-driven projects, because everything at the end of the day is a deadline-driven project. Yeah, that's an interesting one that I'll have to look into myself.
And it's just the fact that it is like in 1 week's time. So, I can't put them off till next week. I have to pretty much from tomorrow onwards, really be focusing on them, getting as much done across the 3 of them as possible. Finishing that off early next week, that's going to take up a lot of my time between now and next week.
Yeah, and really that's long-term planning. Like it's week-long planning, like that way. So it's an interesting one as well. I think that's the end of quadrant 2 work. It's the final stage of a quadrant 2 project for me.
And arguably it's relationship building as well. It's 3 separate organizations.
Yeah,
getting in front of their members or their employees. Doing a good job, hopefully, which I will, and then it's strengthening kind of relationships for the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's it's really interesting with that as well. I think the 3 things, the things that I've been working on, are very black and white, definitively quadrant 2 work. It's about brand, it's about marketing, it's about building for the future. It's long-term planning. It's the essence of long-term planning and networking as well. But I do think some things cross over the boundaries as well. So it's like everything, nothing is black and white. But I just think this provides a very nice matrix to put things into boxes.
Mm-hmm. Question for you on this, right?
Yeah.
If, is there a way to find out that if you just find you're spending all your time, let's say in quadrant 1 across your business and your social enterprise, between the 2, is that when you realize you might have bitten off more than you can chew, or you've got too much on that you just do not have the time to spend in quadrant 2? Is there a way of kind of just a handy formula to figure that out?
Yeah, it does not, unfortunately. And this sort of brings me back. So I was living in quadrant 1 in one aspect of my business for a long time because of my PhD. But the PhD in itself, that thesis, was massive quadrant 2 work. It's building a business card for me, building credibility for myself that's going to really invest in my future. But the outcome or the result of the PhD, which is very much quadrant 2 stuff, had many quadrant 1 stuff in that as well. It was lots of crises within that, lots of pressing problems, and I was pushing other aspects of the business as well. So to answer your question, I think it's context dependent and it's time dependent as well.
Okay.
Like sometimes the nature of something, like all of a sudden something could happen at home with a family emergency, and like that is urgent, it's important, and everything in quadrant 2 has got to go on the back burner if somebody is sick, and that's just the nature of it. Like work and life, we talked about last week about work-life balance. Like you cannot really separate life and work, because we work so much, but if something happens in your personal life that's urgent and important that needs to be put onto it, that's just going to take precedence. So it can be really difficult. I think it's time and it's context dependent as well, but I think the goal is to always be spending more time in quadrant 2. I don't know if did I answer that question.
Yeah, no, you did, and even just seeing this table here is helpful, to be honest, and just knowing that I need to be attempting to spend more time in quadrant 2. And I do what the work I do. I do a lot of. I actually do a lot of quadrant 2 work. Anyway, I know that almost by default, like the relationship building, the community that I've built over the last 4 or 5 years.
What we're doing right now.
That finding new opportunities, it leads to new opportunities. I need to work on the long-term planning. That is one thing I need to do. But all of this is leading to is really quadrant 2 work. It's just I haven't maybe been calling it out as that, or it haven't been clearly defined as that.
Yeah, and I think that's the takeaway thing. A person I've mentioned on this show so many times is Mick Slane. He's a mentor of mine, and he always says that to me: "Are you in quadrant 2? Are you staying in quadrant 2?" And it's just it's that little mantra that you just need to be thinking about.
It's helpful, yeah. And if you have that slide in your head,
it's so helpful. It really is, and really bringing it all back down, Brian, to the accountability habit. Like I find it fascinating. We pick these topics, and it always comes back to that. Like we keep ourselves accountable with different things. We had a chat before this where we were looking to look at long-term planning, to sit down for a 2-hour chat and meeting in a coffee shop for the 2-hour chat. That's really highly focused quadrant 2 work, but we're keeping each other accountable as well. Like having an accountability partner as well to make sure you're in quadrant 2. Us now developing this where we're saying, right, we've quadrant 2 work that we have to do. We're going to keep each other accountable for that as well. So I think it all interlinks,
And then for the entrepreneurs watching in, maybe they're starting out, or maybe it's a challenging time, and they say, this is all well and good, quadrant 2, relationship building, long-term planning, but the bills need to be paid. If the bills aren't paid, I don't have any, the business won't exist. There's no time for relationship building or long-term planning. It's that balance though, isn't it?
That's the key word. It's the word that's first came to me. Like at the end of the day, as I said, like urgent and important. Putting food on the table is urgent and important. If someone gets sick, urgent and important. If you can't drive your car to work, you haven't got the money, it's urgent and important. So the quadrant 1 nearly comes before the quadrant 2. And for an entrepreneur, I think that's the case, because if you're starting out, you're going to have lots of pressing problems. You're going to have lots of mini crises. You're going to have to get food on the table, money in the bank to start off. So it's get your quadrant 1 in order so you can start jumping into quadrant 2. And I think spending more time in quadrant 2 and jumping back and forth, like something that jumped out at me there is like, I don't enjoy doing it. When I have a new topic I have to do, I have to look at YouTube videos, read a book, Audible, and I'm learning new material. That's really quadrant 2 stuff. It's learning this new stuff, and it's real long-term stuff. Like, and there's no immediate rewards to it because you're not getting a paycheck for reading a book, but it's that long-term stuff that's going to pay dividends in the long run.
It really does. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of, we're coming up to 5 to here. Will I call out my targets for next week, and we'll see. I'd written these now beforehand, so let's see if I can get any quadrant 2 in there. Well, actually, I do. I have I've just pushed my plan for 2022 in there, so that's in there. I've got my webinar tomorrow on ISO 45003, so I want to smash that and do a really good job with the communications all around that, the follow-ups. One sec. Still not 100% out of the woods.
That's that 2% right there.
And those 3 events I have falling on the Wednesday and the Thursday.
Yeah, excellent. It's a really, you have to pose a great question to me there. It's something that I'm going to go and look up, and I think that nearly falls in between quadrant 1 and 2. And it's like this: is nothing's ever black and white, you know. It's a nice one. I'm going to look, if anyone's interested in this, and where I'm going to go is look at the Eisenhower Matrix or the Covey Matrix, and there's loads of material out there on it. There's so much on it that goes into depth on this. Like I think that there's probably books on this stuff for all, you know, going into the depths of this.
Oh yeah.
But in terms of my own things, Brian, it's my 3 things now for next week. So in terms of I have my business proposal, and I'm on the marketing section now. So it's a marketing analysis, and that's the section. It's section 3 that I want to have done on that next week. In terms of another aspect of that as well, one of my mentors says I need to do a customer persona. So I thought this would take me 20 minutes, do a customer persona, like a little quadrant 1 thing, need to tick this box, get it out of the way. I looked in, and now customer personas are a huge thing. So I went down a rabbit hole for about
That's something you need. Yeah, that's something like, I'm lucky. I have for Workwell Ireland, it's the HR professional, or it's the wellbeing service provider. They'd be my 2 personas. Yeah.
Yeah, so I need that persona, and it's helped me to recognize that I have 3 types of customers, which I didn't really realize that. So I've been working on this already, but I want to finish that customer persona, to have that, and market segmentation, which comes out of that as well. So I need to segment my market, and I'll do my market analysis and the market segmentation, and it really fits in with the business proposal I want to do as well. And then the last thing I want to do is, from my website, I want to collect and collate all of the videos, all of the images, and all of the stuff that I need for my new website, and get it over to my website designer. So that's the big one. And the 3 of them all interlink, and it's big time quadrant 2 work. Definitely is quadrant 2 work. So it's nice to be doing that.
Excellent. Yeah, nice one. So yeah, so you've already got that kind of quadrant 2 focus in your target. That's something I'm going to include from now on. I'll be conscious of it, at least when I'm putting my targets together.
I think every time we're doing the 3 takeaways, where this should be a new focus, right? Is a quadrant 1, is a quadrant 2? What are we doing? You know, it's a nice focus.
Yeah.
And I think something as well we didn't touch on, Brian, I think we're going to be talking about it next week, is in terms of saying no. And it's one of the biggest things that we need to do. Like the things that are going to rob your time, like saying no to Facebook, saying no to jumping on Twitter for 2 hours. That's quadrant 4 work. Quadrant 3 is, let's say, if somebody interrupts you, you're going for the coffee, it's urgent because you have to deal with it now, but it's not important. So you've got to say no. So you've got to look at people pleasing. Like quadrant 2 is personal growth, learning how to say no and not being a people pleaser. That's quadrant 2, which eliminates quadrant 4 and eliminates quadrant 3 work. So they all interact in that way as well. But I think saying no, and ability to say no to what's not important so you can focus on what is important, is absolutely crucial. And I think we could have a good chat on that next week.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do that next week then. So how to say no.
How to say no, and do it artfully and gracefully. That's the key.
Brilliant. We'll finish up before I have another coughing fit here. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it. Great chat. Really enjoyed that today, Brian. Cheers. Thanks,
Brian.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week.